we have a distinguished panel here, and I'll just pick up where I left off. I was at a group of water leaders at this water charrette just about an hour or two ago, and I closed up where I'm going to pick off right now, which is there's been a confluence of factors of private capital and public good that are converging right now, and they're mixing with the need to make sure that water quality is taken care of, but that the water supply is bolstered so that we can reduce reliance on imported water pursuant to not just Mayor Garcetti's directive, but I think every prior mayor has tried to do that, but none with more urgency than when we had the 500-year drought. So we have this panel before us. The first person who's going to talk, if my presentation isn't loaded up, and I can just recite the key highlights of it. First person who's going to talk is Jonathan Bishop. Jonathan has served as the Chief Deputy Director at the State Water Board since 2007. That's the State Water Resources Control Board for those non-water buffaloes in the room. That's the lead water agency that now handles not just water resources and appeals from the regional water boards, the 9 regional water boards, but also handles drinking water since the Department of Health Services kicked it out and Felicia Marcus inherited it a few years ago. And Jonathan oversees water quality, financial assistance monitoring and assessment, and data management, among other things. And he worked for the LA Regional Water Quality Control Board for 23 years, and I'm pretty sure he served as executive officer.
Yes, I did.
Not during the times of trouble, but he actually served during the times of reform. And I know what that's like, to serve during the times of reform. Those are good times. Jonathan received his Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Engineering, an emphasis on water quality from Humboldt State. Irma Munoz. Irma. My sister, soul sister, whose heart is always in the right place and who regulates with a firm and solid hand, but always with an effort to doing the right thing within the confines of what her legal counsel tells her to do, kind of what I try to do. And I have tried to, I've tried to emulate what Irma has done. Irma is the founder and the founder of the Mujeres de la Tierra environmental community outreach group of communication specialists that has its headquarters near the LA River at the LA River Center. The Mujeres group believes in the power of one, and that community action starts with individual participation, and has inspired local women and their children to take ownership of leadership of neighborhood issues and concerns. I'm going to skip some of this other stuff, but Irma is, what's not included in here is Irma brings a sense of balance to any policy-making debate. What she doesn't talk about is, in this bio, is she was an appointee of the Clinton administration, deputy administrator at the Small Business Administration. So she actually worked with a lot of small businesses, which we're going to be talking about because they are actually the source of some of the funding that we're going to be discussing for stormwater. She also has developed some creative ways of reaching out culturally, in a culturally fluent way, to the community of undocumented immigrants, community of speakers of many different languages, communities of the disenfranchised, the left out and forgotten, and the homeless. And I had the unique opportunity and pleasure to receive an award from Irma and the Benito Juarez Award from Mujeres de la Tierra. And Irma did something that nobody would have ever thought to do. Dia de los Muertos. She honored the homeless. She put a face to the nameless. And that's what I think we all need to do, and we need to think about, and that's what kind of this ultimately is going to be about when we get to the punchline. James Simonelli leader in not just the manufacturing, but commercial businesses. He's the executive director for the California Metals Coalition, and for 20 years he's represented the state's metalworking sector, which consists of nearly 4,000 businesses employing over 350,000 Californians. James is also the author of numerous pieces of legislation and has been the co-chair of the Sacramento's Water Coalition, which is a statewide group of over 300 water trade associations with water interests. He was the project lead on a UCLA study on potable water supply, getting the lead out of water, and actually the author of a very innovative law, Wilma Chan's AB 1953, that voluntarily brought the industry together to reduce lead content in potable water supply pipes from 6 to 8% all the way down to 0.25%. Is that right, James?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we got that. Then lastly, Robert Green. Robert is one of the editorial writers covering water, drought, and this very diverse group of subjects, including criminal justice reform and Los Angeles County government. Mr. Green was a staff writer for the LA Weekly and a reporter and associate editor for the Metropolitan News Enterprise. Prior to becoming a journalist, he was an attorney in Los Angeles. He's a resident of Highland Park and a graduate of USC. Fight on for everybody like that, okay? We like UCLA also. And Georgetown, go Hoyas, okay? Georgetown Law School. So since we now have this presentation up here, let me get into the guts of it. Where I ended up was there are 3,500 commercial facilities with between 2 and 20 acres right under our nose that are about to spend $3 billion on stormwater to treat it and discharge it when we need to put it in the ground. And so that's how I'd like to frame the entire discussion. They happen to be located in some very interesting areas, and I will just say they're not in my neighborhood near Hancock Park or Bel Air or wherever David Nahai lives, which I know is not where these facilities are. But I'm going to get right into this, because what LADWP did after investigation with Jonathan Bishop, a collaborative, we actually, LADWP brought the people who fought one another, the citizens groups, the bay keepers, water keepers of the world, the experts who worked for those groups, and industry, people like James Simonelli and others, together to try to work together on coming up with a way to solve both water quality and water resources issues at the same time. So, how do we move this? Oh, okay. Okay, so everybody knows this. State Water Board, LA Regional Water Board. Do we have anybody else elected or former appointed officials like David Nahai, the former chair of the LA Regional Water Board here, and Irma Munoz, and Jonathan Bishop? No? Okay, so this, just to put things into perspective, you have LA County, you have a piece of Ventura County here. It's a lot of pictures. I like pictures. Let's see. Sorry, it's
2 fingers.
2 fingers. Can you help me out one more time? What's it? Oh, yeah, okay. So this is a little bit about the project. This was, by the way, this was brought to our, the LA Department of Water and Power Board, of which I'm one of the 5 commissioners. And it hasn't been approved, it hasn't been disapproved. It was brought as a management report in June of 2016. Basically, this is also a presentation that was given by our good people, Rafael Villegas. Who else is here from the DWP? Evelyn Cortez Davis. Okay, and the team, Martin and Aaron, to try to make a lot of things work when we're trying to seek public funding for stormwater capture projects. Why not go after private funding that was going to be spent on stormwater treatment anyway? Okay. So this goes through the compliance option with the industrial general permit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip through some of the state water board stuff because Jonathan Bishop's going to get into that, the permitting options and things like that. But I want to go right to my favorite part, which is the maps. Okay? So we have the technical analysis, and then let's see. Where's the map? Where's the map, Raphael? It's not on the presentation. Okay. Okay. Anyway, let me explain it with my hands because I'm pretty good with my hands. So what happened was we had permittees in the LA Regional Water Board, 1,300 in the city of Los Angeles. And you know what the city of Los Angeles looks like? It's like this. It's a big fat thing at the top, a little skinny thing, and then a big fat thing at the bottom, right? San Pedro. Well, guess what? When we mapped the adjudicated basins, water basins, on top of the industrial permittees, what do we find? They all are sitting on top of many are sitting on top of the adjudicated basins. So what we figured at LADWP was how can we incent the stormwater dischargers that would otherwise spend this billions of dollars, up to $1 million and even more per site, to treat and discharge, and sent them to move to put the water in the ground. We needed help from the State Water Board, and the State Water Board did their duty, and they told the permittees that it's okay to infiltrate and reaffirm that as recently as November. There are things that many of you in water world may know about. I'm not going to get into what TMDLs are, total maximum daily loads. All I can tell you is that they make the cost even more for these discharges. They could make it even more than $1 million. So we're talking about lots of money that would go to be spent on treatment and discharge that now could be possibly moved to putting the water in the ground. And none of the money that DWP would be putting up would be just enough to nudge the needle, to push the needle, to get companies to consider doing it without making them doing it. So that's what the program's about. I think it's coming before the board at some time in the next month or two. I really can't talk much more about it other than to express my gratitude and appreciation to Mayor Garcetti for allowing me to serve for 5 years and actually get something like this off the ground that I think is about what his agenda is about, which is really bringing in industrial, private capital to making sure that public good is done and making sure that water quality objectives are met while we increase the water supply. So I'm going to turn things over to Jonathan, and if you want to figure out how this PowerPoint works, Jonathan, you can, but otherwise you can talk about the stormwater permit as much as you want. I think we have about 35 minutes left, okay?
So I didn't bring a PowerPoint. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about the industrial stormwater permit and our reopener that we are in the process of right now. So a few years ago, the State Water Board adopted the industrial general permit after 12 years of delay. Redid it 2 or 3 times to do that. It's a major overhaul of the permit. And as we came to the end of that process, it was pointed out to us that all of the industrial facilities that were named in TMDLs had not had any input into that process. And so we deferred the TMDL adoption or inclusion in the permit so that we could have some stakeholder interaction and some outreach from the regions with the stakeholders. So that was a couple of years ago. During that intervening time, the staff at the State Water Board worked with the staff at the regional boards, met with stakeholders, tried to interpret the TMDLs into language that works for a stormwater permit, especially a general stormwater permit. And I'll take a lot of blame. was intimately involved in writing many of those TMDLs when I worked at the Los Angeles Board. Before I was the executive officer, I ran the TMDL program from its inception at the regional board for a number of years. And it seemed perfectly fine to me at the time to say, and all stormwater people have one group allocation in the TMDL. It's a lot harder to then actually write that into a permit a few years later. But we set up what seems like a, one of these Alcoholic Anonymous programs. We had a 7-step program that the staff had to follow to evaluate the TMDL, evaluate the permit, and figure out how they all fit together. In the end, we came up with 3 general pieces. Either the TMDLs, what the TMDL contemplated was already included in the permit, and so complying with the permit would satisfy the needs of the TMDL. So that was one bucket. Second bucket was that the structure of the industrial permit, which has a what's called a action level in it, and instead of action level, it would be a TMDL-based action level, and then that would kick into further actions depending on if that was exceeded. So that was another bucket worth of, and then the third was numeric effluent limits. When the permit was clear that the way to achieve the TMDL compliance, or excuse me, the TMDL was clear, the way to achieve that is to have a concentration-based limit at the site. So we proposed those 3 and went out and started talking to folks about a year and a half ago. During those discussions, we had questions about, well, is there a way to incentivize some sort of alternate compliance that would be similar to the approach the LA board has done with their EWIMPs, it's enhanced watershed plans, capture and infiltrate the 85th percentile. So we looked at that. We asked folks to get us information on why they think this would satisfy the TMDL requirements.
Excuse me, Jonathan, 1 second, okay? I'm sorry, but I do want to leave time for the rest of the panel.
I'm almost done.
Okay, great.
So we came up with 2 alternate compliance approaches. One is on-site, 85th percentile capture. It has some requirements. You can ask me about those requirements. Clearly they're not important because Bill doesn't want me to talk. But it does require some water quality-based requirements. If you meet that, capture and infiltration, we're proposing that you be in compliance with the TMDLs, and based on comments, we're extending that to the water, to the water quality-based effluent limits, or the receiving water limits, so that you would be in compliance with all your water quality requirements. We also are proposing a off-site alternate compliance that you can work with your local municipality to join in with one of their programs. I will leave it at that, and you guys can ask me any questions you want.
I think Robert will have a lot of questions. Go ahead.
Do you want me to ask now or wait until?
Why don't you let Yerma go?
Yeah,
But
I think it
feel
makes sense.
free to, as our responder on the panel, feel free to ask whenever you want.
To ask questions like, huh?
Well, good afternoon, Bill. Thank you for that really nice introduction. I was appointed by the governor to the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Board 6 years ago, and I've been the chair for the last 2 years. The reason I ran for chair will give you the framework for my leadership style and my commitment and my priorities for the water board. I was working a lot in the San Gabriel Valley, and I kept hearing from mayors and from city managers that the water board was only interested in coastal issues. They only cared about beach communities at the expense of inland communities, and that really bothered me because I'm about everybody having a place at the table. Because the reality is, if you don't have a place at the table, you'll create your own table, and then you've got a lot more problems. I know that because I've built several tables for purposes when people have excluded me. I was by no means a water expert, but that didn't matter to the governor. What he wanted was someone who was going to be fair and someone who understood the issues on a different level. And so I decided when we had the MS4 hearings a number of years ago, I saw so much fear and heard so much fear from the cities and our permittees that they didn't know how they were going to comply. And so in many respects, we instilled a lot of fear in them, and what I wanted to do was instill facts in their head. So I initiated what I call listening sessions. And I was very surprised that the cities were surprised that I could even talk to them and be in the same room, because of this thing we have ex parte communications where they can't talk to us if we have a pending matter. So when we started that, we clarified what ex parte communications are, because that in itself was a big mystery. And if you know me, I love to talk, but I think I love more to listen because I learn so much. And so we started with the San Gabriel COG, and it was amazing. I took staff with me. Our executive officer, Sam Unger, went. Hugh Marley, who is the chief of the Division for Industrial Permits, and Renee Purdy, who wrote the majority of the MS4 permit. And after, when I told him I'm here because this is our issue, this isn't your issue, it's about all of us. Water quality is about everyone. And I'm a big collaborator, and I believe that people really want to work together, especially when you have such an enormous, overwhelming task in front of you. So the listening sessions taught me a lot, that everybody cares about water quality. They just are so fearful that they don't know how to take the first step. So the first thing I did was I started looking at why there was so many reasons that many cities weren't complying. And so I started thinking, wait a second, do all of them require their industrial businesses to have a permit from the water board when they go for their business license? And guess what? We found one city that did, and that was Glendora. I even asked someone, but the city of Los Angeles does not. Can you imagine if every industrial business went for their business license to the city of Los Angeles and they asked them for have a permit from us before they got the business license? How much more in compliance they would be? And it's a no-brainer, folks. I mean, so I'm looking for things that don't cost money, that make a lot of sense and can be done. But I have to tell you the truth, that this was not inspired just by the listening sessions. This was inspired by the Metals Coalition that you're going to hear from James Simonelli and from SA Recycling. They had told me about this before I was on the water board. They're concerned that they had a number of bad actors, as they would call them, in their industry that they want to make sure they can get into compliance. So here's the industry coming to me and saying, we need help. So what we did is I said, okay, how are we going to do this? So I said, I've got the industry, SA Recycling, who is a number of businesses throughout the state of California, including Southern California, the Metals Coalition, who I'd been working with for about 10 years. And then I thought, LA Waterkeeper and Heal the Bay also are concerned about this. So let me get the traditional environmental groups, let me get cities, let's get the water board, and get members of the industry to work on a common goal. And it was Bruce Resnick from LA Waterkeeper who said, I've been trying to do this for so many years. This sounds like a great idea. I'm in. Because we focused on that one goal, that one focus, and that one determination. And it's amazing what you can get done when everybody's on the right page. And people try to bring all sorts of other issues to the table. I said, no, that's not what we're talking about here. And we are succeeding. We have gone to the League of Cities and talked to a number of cities there. Richard Watson was our facilitator. Speaker Rendon hosted had to hold a meeting for his cities. Really good meeting. And we continue to do that. And it's amazing what happens when you start listening to folks. Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, Vice Mayor Thomas Small. Vice Mayor of Culver City, does your city require a permit from us before they get their business license? I know you don't have many industrial sites, but the few that you do have, do you know? We're going to. There we go. We got one more person. So I guess what I want to encourage those of you, whether you're in the industry or if you're a permittee or you want to be a partner collaborator, one of the things that I have done is trying to change the culture of the water board. And if you ask the governor and others, they tell you you have succeeded. Because now we got a human face to the word water board. We go to folks, they don't come to us. we listened to them, and at that first listening session, we had a city that really had a complicated issue. And we sat down right there and did a workshop and resolved their issue. Now, I want to be very clear. If you're a city who has no intentions, I'm going to wrap up my remarks. If you're a city and you have no intentions of complying, you will be fined. But if you're a city that is working on a project and you realize, oh my God, we need an additional 2 or 3 years, you're going to get that. Because you've proven and you've shown good intent and goodwill at the same time. Thank you so much. And, you know, if you're a city, invite me to your COG or to your group, and I would be more than happy to do a listening session with you. Thank you so much. So I want to introduce James Simonelli, who I've known for over 10 years, and because of him, he's really provided a lot of credibility to the work that we're doing.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, my name is James Simonelli. I'm Executive Director of the California Metals Coalition. We are manufacturers. We make things. We always tease Tesla, they just assemble the car, we make the parts, and send them the parts, and then they put it together and have big shows and popularity. We're the guys in the trenches all along the corridor and Southgate and Compton and Watts making the parts and sending them. So they're our customers at the end. But obviously my connection is twofold. One is being regulated, obviously. We have permits with either the cities or the regional water boards, state water boards. But second is to find solutions. The one thing that I always want to participate in and challenge myself in is to find solutions. And in talking to Bill Funderburk, talking about the location of our facilities, and I know he didn't have the picture, but when, oh, he might? Oh, did I cue you up well? Yeah, no, you know, obviously he made the point of, you know, when we're discharging our water, we're obviously treating it, making sure it meets water quality standards, but then what do you do with it? Obviously, the one is to discharge it into the municipal sewers, but the other is to infiltrate. And what does that do for our water table, California, the need for water? And so when we go to the LADWP or go to the LA Regional Water Boards and understand what they want, they understand they have a natural partner. And within any sector, you have leaders. And within our sector, we've got companies that'll step up and say, I want to do it. We have some companies that say, let me see, you know, let Joe do it first and see how it works before I do it. But the reality is that California is a leader. And when we look at our sector as manufacturing and we look at LADWP, the water boards, we expect to take the lead role. Now, the big thing, and I want to key off of Irma's point, is we also want to make sure there's equity. Within our industry, we have a number of facilities that have permits. Within our industry, we have people that don't. And we go to the water boards, we go to the cities and say, you know what, if I'm doing my work and I'm making sure the water's clean for me and businesses, what about the person next door? And so to Irma's point, we've been working with her on making sure there's a way to pull that together. And I've worked with the cities before. We understand this isn't a thankless task. It's going to be a hard task. But they have to understand that we can offer benefits, offer ways of doing that. And then with Jonathan, with his work at the State Water Board, mainly I both discussed and debated with him a lot with the permit, the industrial general permit, understanding what the numbers might be, the implications. But at the end of the day, coming up with a permit that will move us forward. And I think with the reopening of the TMDLs, I think with what we're trying to do with everything, you'll see that between industry and government, and then you as the supporters of that, is to try to move everything forward. So, Bill, that's my main comments, and I just want to make sure that...
That was great.
Okay,
Very
thank you.
short. So, great. Robert, do you have any comments based on the indoctrination that I gave you into the subject about all of an hour ago? and then any questions?
I have a couple questions. I approach this issue the way I would think that a reader would be interested in hearing what's going on, general interest reader, in a Los Angeles Times editorial. And so you're helping me write editorials right now. I appreciate that. Thank you. But a couple questions. So you know well that Los Angeles has a kind of double reputation. One as a place that was built on petroleum and an industrial base in especially the second half of the 20th century. And it has a reputation now of a place that is unfriendly to business because of regulation, because of water shortages, and because of, at least until recently, an inability to move very quickly on our water and pollution challenges. So the question is, do you see now in the type of thing that you're talking about, do you see that Los Angeles as a place that is retaining its industrial base, or one that is going to continue to be a very serious challenge to companies that might look at other places that are a little cheaper and have less of a regulatory?
My 15 seconds is, this is in response to that question, that exact question. Unfriendly and contaminated, and how the heck are you going to even make sense of this? So I'm going to let James and Jonathan talk about this, and Irma can weigh in, but I think this is the solution to that problem.
So I don't know if it's going to make people feel like there's more friendly regulation, but this came out of, our alternative compliance came out of a request from both the industrial group and the NGOs. And it was a combined request. And it's pretty hard for me to turn down a combined request from those two.
Yeah, I'd say in general, I mean, the thing that's interesting when it comes to the competitiveness of California, and I'd ask the group this, is do you shop on Amazon or do you buy your books at a bookstore? And, you know, when it comes to making stuff, people with their own habits are just get it to my doorstep. And when I'm making a part and sending it, I'll pick on Tesla again, they just want it on their doorstep, whether it's made in Nevada or California or Mexico or China. And so, you know, that competitive side of things makes it challenging for the businesses. On the flip side, a smart business person will look for a competitive edge. And if you can find a way to get a competitive edge with stormwater, with regulatory, with things that we know California is going to lead and the nation's going to follow, you bet we want to be part of that solution. And if these, you know, colleagues and people I work with say, hey, you know what, we've got a solution for stormwater, and I can figure out a way to control my costs, that's a smart business solution. And so that's where we try to come in.
Next one, Rob.
I'm also interested in, you pointed out the very interesting map, which does kind of outline the Los Angeles River. And the lower Los Angeles River has recently gone through a process of public input and deciding what how that river is going to be, if developed is the wrong word, maybe I think preserved is the wrong word too, or kind of struggling, but reborn. And I wonder the degree to which the process that you're talking about and the infiltration of water is separate from or integrated with the Los Angeles River and its restoration.
So I'll just have a short thing, and then if Irma wants to jump in as the regional board. From the state board's point of view, restoration is difficult, if not impossible, with contamination in the water. So if you're not addressing the contamination, the restoration will fail, in my opinion.
Thank you for asking that question. The number one source of bacteria in the Los Angeles River is human waste due to the homeless. And so we have to approach this in a connectivity way. It's not just, it's the homelessness, but I think the one thing that has really, I think the word is irked or bothered, is that we have a lot of entities and universities and nonprofits that go into the LA River to do water quality testing. I think it's great. However, why isn't it coordinated with the water board? That is what we do. We want to work with you so that we can get the maximum benefit from these water quality testing. And everybody's got a different angle, but at the end of the day, it's poor. And we are going to use it for recreation. It better be good quality water, because we're telling the public that it's safe to go in the water, and we need to make sure that it is. And I was asked this morning if the Regional Water Board would take on as their priority the Los Angeles River, because we really don't have a conflict, and there are a whole bunch of folks that do. So I'm going to urge my colleagues, including the State Board, for us to take the lead on the Los Angeles River.
I'm going to let Robert continue the questions. And does anybody in the audience have any? Robert, why don't you try one more, and then maybe we can ask the audience and then go back to you.
All of you touched on this to a certain degree, but I want to press down a little bit further on the question of environmental justice, because it is simply a fact of life that where there's heavy industry, there are also communities that are affected by that industry, and there's water that is affected by that industry. And I wonder, you were talking, Irma, about the participation of communities in hammering out various plans. To what degree do you believe that communities affected by polluted water are at this point in the process fully incorporated in a way that other communities that don't have the same challenges have been at the head of discussions, for example, of the upper Los Angeles River?
I started noticing that no one from the EJ community or neighborhoods came before the water board. I can't remember when a Latino, an African American, or someone from a poor white community has come to testify before us. And that really bothered me. So I started talking to EJ leaders, and particularly Mark Lopez. I said, Mark, look, I know that you guys focus on air quality, but if you got air quality issues, believe me, you got water quality issues. And this conversation has been going on for 2.5 years, and he's finally going to be coming to our March water board meeting. It's taken me a long time because there's a lot of distrust, and I understand it. You know, I never thought I'd be a regulator. That's kind of frightening to me to be a regulator, but that's the job that I have. So what you do is got to nurture and cultivate trust with folks, and that is what we're doing. We have a staff member dedicated to going to the Environmental Justice Coalition meetings. So now we need to bring them into, I've gone to their neighborhood, now they need coming to the water board, and I think you're right. There is where a lot of work needs to take place, and we're present there as well. But we need to talk to the leadership, the folks that live in that neighborhood, who lead those issues, that we're there with to work with them. So believe me, it's something that I personally have been very bothered about. And so finally, I'm seeing some traction.
Let me just say one thing there. I think there's a vocabulary issue. When people hear industrial stormwater, they think it's polluted automatically because it's industrial. Well, it's not necessarily polluted. In fact, much surface water standards, in many cases for metals, are 100 times more strict than drinking water standards. This water that I have right here, it's clean, it's good, it's healthy, it's LADWP water, it must be, right, Marty? But the copper standard, this water would be contaminating stormwater, because the copper standard for drinking water is 1.3 milligrams per liter. The surface water drinking standard, and you don't need to be a mathematician to know this, is 0.0048. That's 100 times lower. So if it's going to cost a lot to treat down to that standard, then it just makes economic sense for companies that are under these permits, that are separately under permits, under separate technology standards, to put the water in the ground so long as it's done. Is Liz Croson here? Because I don't have my glasses, Liz, I'm sorry. And Liz is the mayor's deputy chief sustainability officer and was very involved in the development of it. And she insisted at every step of the way, the water, if it goes in the ground, has to be done responsibly. So it either needs to be pre-treated, or there needs to be a lysimeter put behind it, or both, but it needs to be done in a responsible manner so it doesn't make things worse or make anything worse. But the good thing about things is, and maybe I could ask you, Liz, to say whatever you have to say about this, because I think that you have been very helpful in trying to come up with some of these innovative ways and encourage us the best you can through the mayor's office as DWP commissioners to bring about Mayor Garcetti's innovative agenda. and thank you for all the work that you've put in for our mayor. Robert, I'm going to ask Irma. Irma wants to call on somebody, as instead of, and nobody's raised their hand, and Irma wants to call on somebody already, just like I did. And then we'll close it out with a couple more questions from you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vanderberg. I wanted to introduce you, I did earlier, Hugh Marley, who's the chief of the Enforcement Division, and he has five staff members in his division, so you can see what the challenges we have. But he's the one who goes and with his team goes and does outreach with the businesses. So I was going to ask him what his experiences are when he goes into the EJ communities and neighborhoods with the high industry, because I think you might be able to give a fuller answer.
See, nobody realized that we were going to call on you and ask you questions.
Here you go.
It's like law class.
Why not use them?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we do. We have been recently working with Cali EPA, for instance, on their environmental justice initiatives, and we've been going out to places like Boyle Heights, Pacoima, Sun Valley, and more recently in Pomona, and doing a lot of inspections. We're working with the community to identify potential non-filers, and we've been visiting these non-filers, hundreds of site inspections that we've been doing, and we've been identifying these businesses and doing a lot of outreach in the form of knocking on their doors, telling them that they need a permit, and giving them trifolds and handouts and fact sheets, and coming back and visiting them and making sure they sign up before we go into our progressive enforcement routine that usually ends up in a penalty. And we found with this process, our success rate is really good. And for the most part, except for a handful of folks, we get them to sign up and into the permit.
That's great. It sounds to me like you need some more resources to find new sources of water, though.
Did you hear that?
Well,
I didn't say that.
we would love
We would love
resources.
to work
We
with
would
you.
love it.
We
Okay.
would love to work with you.
Thank you.
We won't call on anybody else.
Okay.
But that's what James was talking about, taking a different turn on the word equity, actually, because equity works in many ways. It's not just dispelling the vocabulary. What do we think about equity? What does everybody think about? Oh, those poor people, okay? Equity is us. They will always be they until they can be us. And it's about thinking about everybody working together, whether it's the 90-year-old woman, daughter of coal miners from West Virginia in Reseda, who is frightened to hear about what her DWP bill is going to look like, or it's someone else in our, many of the parts of the city. Do you want to close it up, Robert, with a final responding question?
I do. I'm thinking of several years ago when there was a proposal before the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors for a stormwater fee, and it was defeated, or rather it was pulled in part because there was a relatively low, in my perception, a relatively low level of understanding in Los Angeles about what our challenge was and what we could achieve and what the options were. And I wonder from each of you, what do you think is our level of understanding now? Are we better? And if we are not, what do we need to do? What kind of message needs to be sent to get to that place?
Okay, everybody, in 15 seconds, James, go.
Well, I just want to say this, is that, as an industrial facility, it has to be equity. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, when you're asking for a fee, just to answer your question, for your fee, it has to be from residents as well. I mean, how many people have washed their cars and it goes down your driveway? Do you have gutters? Do you have filters on your gutters? We have filters on our gutters. Do you treat the water at your home? We treat the water at our business. And so when it comes to something like a fee, I think the understanding to the general public is everybody's got to pay.
Okay, Jonathan.
Go ahead.
I feel like, Jonathan.
So I think your question on do we understand better? Do the folks understand better? A little bit. I think there's still a long way to go in educating folks about stormwater, the opportunities and the cost associated with not taking those opportunities on.
Thank you. Your member leaders.
I think the focus and the energies and efforts that was extended in educating folks about the drought should be the same kind of energy and focus and effort on the upcoming bond measure.
And I would say not just the drought, but I would say going back to when people thought stormwater was actually treated, and there were those big posters, people finally realized that stormwater actually goes to the ocean. So I guess that's it, and thank you very much to our panel. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Bye-bye.